Hey there, Kendall County. Welcome back to another edition of the Texas Examiner, the Kendall County edition. We're so happy that you could join us today. If you're watching us on YouTube, please make sure that right now, before you do anything else, reach down there, hit that bell for notification and the subscribe button. We'd also be very interested in hearing your comments. If you're watching us on Facebook or one of the other social media outlets, please leave a comment, like, subscribe, and follow. Today, we are honored to have with us two esteemed members of the community. We have Chief Perez from the Boerne Police Department. Sir, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
And we also have with us Mr. David Parent, who is famous for his musical abilities, as well as a criminal defense attorney here within Kendall County. So, sir, thank you very much for being able to join us today.
Thanks for the invite.
John, well, why don't we get started with our chief of police?
Okay.
Most of us know our chief of police, but we don't know a lot about, what brought you here, chief. Tell us your journey to Boerne.
Yeah, so I grew up in San Antonio, so right down the road from Boerne. Went to school there, left to the Army, and when I got out, my goal was to go into law enforcement. Went through the SAC Academy in San Antonio, and once shortly after I got certified through the academy and everything, started looking around for jobs. My first place was Alamo Community College District. So worked for SAC and Palo Alto and some of those community colleges. And then shortly after that, I ran into a friend of mine who I went through the academy with, and she was working up here in Boerne. And so we met through a local training. And at that point, she's like, "Hey, Boerne's hiring. You want to come on board?" And so from that point on, I filled out an application. I started here back in September of '99.
Wow. So there's upward mobility in the Boerne Police Department.
There is upward mobility.
You're
Yes.
a perfect example of it.
Yes,
right?
sir.
Climbed
Yes,
all the way up to the chief of police.
Yes, sir. So I've been here, like I said, just over 24 years, and started out in patrol, did patrol for a while, then got promoted sergeant, went into CID, which is a criminal investigations division.
Yes.
And then from there, just continued to move on up.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for what you do for our community.
What'd you do in the Army? I'm just curious what.
So I was a mechanized infantry, 11 Mike.
11
the
mics.
First infantry.
Boy, his voice just raised there.
I know. I can
Sound like you were proud of that, chief.
So you're not real fond of the Cav guys then?
Everyone's got a job to do.
Cav guy.
Everyone has a job to do. I like that. Yeah. And Mr. Parent, Dave Parent, we probably the most likable defense attorney in the community. I don't know if that's because you do a good job as a defense attorney or it's because you do a good job on stage as a musician.
Man, I would hope it's the musician part.
Tell us about yourself, Dave.
I'm from Beaumont originally.
Okay.
Actually, not Beaumont, Nederland, which is right near Beaumont.
Right.
When you talk about little small towns, nobody knows where you're talking about. But after a couple of years of miserably failing at college, I decided to join the Army as well. And spent 3.5 years in the Army. On the way out, I had a family member who was a police officer in Corpus Christi. And kind of the same thing as Steve's talking about. Hey, we're always hiring, and I needed a job. So 18 years later, I retired and went to law school.
Wow. Well, so
Been
you
doing this for about 12 years.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you for your service as a police officer as well, Dave.
Thank you.
And that's one of the reasons we invited the chief and Dave, because we thought it would be a great duo that can talk about the issues of law enforcement in our community. Part of what we do in the Texas Examiner is try to bring people that'll talk about a certain issue and give us different perspectives. Not that there's one right or wrong, but different perspectives so people can walk in your shoes, Chief, and can also walk in your shoes or your client's shoes, Dave, as to, when it happens to them, when they have to have an encounter with a police department or law enforcement. Along those lines, Chief, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is in today's world where police officers are watched from every angle, and they even have cameras.
Yes, sir.
Do you feel that officers have the discretion to make calls on the street like they used to maybe 20, 30 years ago?
Well, obviously, it's changed from 20, 30 years ago. Just the technology itself, you mentioned the cameras, that's changed a whole lot of law enforcement side. I know Dave's been doing this, started probably before I did, and there was no cameras when I first started here. We only went to in-car cameras, but you didn't have body cameras. Everything's body camera now.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it does change a whole lot of things. You have to change. You have to evolve with the technology. Of course, legislation has enacted new rules and procedures. And then also being part of a recognition program, there are certain procedures that have to be followed.
Right.
And so, there's no doubt it's changed. And so, but I think it's great. I think the camera keeps everybody professional, keeps them honest. Most of the complaints we get, we go back to looking at those cameras, and 9 times out of 10, it saves the officers. And I know Dave can attest to that part. So, I mean, yeah, I think it's great.
Does it also kind of limit an officer? For example, I was a border patrol agent and worked in Laredo, El Paso, and we often ran into juveniles along the border that were citizens doing some mischief or something. And we didn't have cameras at the time. Of course, we always had the discretion. Some agents were a little more hardcore than others and would arrest them for trespassing. Then there was some agents that would say, I'm going to call their parents. Or I'm going to give them a good talking to if they thought the kid was someone that would learn. Some of the officers I've spoken to, not in Boerne, but in different police departments, tell me that they don't feel like they have that discretion anymore. With if they try to do a good deed, they could get in trouble. Is that still the case? Or
no? I think every situation is different, right? I think it depends on the incident and what the actual issue is. Some things depending on the age of the juvenile and what they're actually doing. And if there's a victim, as far as like an individual, obviously if it's an attack against another individual, they have a say so. If it's something kind of like what you says, a trespassing, something that's, not, I would say as bad, right? It's not like an assault type of crime. Then sometimes that's probably the way to go, is to the parents and let the parents handle it. But part of that has changed too. A lot of times parents don't want to handle that, and they want us to, they want to scare their kids and say, no, take them to juvie, because they need to learn their lesson. Again, if they done it and it's a crime and all the elements are met, then so be it. But again, it's the officers still have the discretion to a certain point.
That's good to hear. Dave, what do you see? Do you get a lot of clients that are juveniles here in this part of the county?
Actually, I don't do juvenile.
Okay.
That's one of the areas that I've stayed away from, just because I had kids, and at the time, I still have kids, by the way.
Okay.
They're just grown. But when you have your own children, working in that environment, it's a little more stressful because you personalize that.
Interesting.
So it's like when I was on the streets, the area I worked for almost 5 years had a children's hospital on it, and I had a blast working there up until my first child was born. And when I started personalizing the victims of these crimes, if it was a sexual assault of a child, if it was an aggravated assault, or, I worked a few deaths, where babies got killed. Prior to having my own kids, it was, Steve will tell you this too, it's formulaic.
Yeah.
You go in and you have to, accumulate the evidence, put the evidence together. Of course, where we were, it was a bigger department. So you bring in detectives, you bring in supervisors. For a long time, it was just in and out, write the report, go home at night. You don't lose any sleep. As soon as my first child was born, you start thinking, what if that was my kid?
Yep. And
after that, I had to call my supervisor and say, hey, look, you got to pull me out of here. I've been here too long. So it's pretty stressful. What was your original question?
No, I think it's about discretion. No, and I'm glad you said that, because that is true, that we often forget that officers, because they wear the uniform, they're people too, and they have families too, and they carry that trauma as well, psychological as well as physical sometimes. But as far as the cases that you represent, let's say there's a drug case. I know here in Kendall County, we're pretty strict about drug cases. Our prosecutors are, I guess. Do you see cases that, in your opinion, probably could have been handled at a lower level, or?
Absolutely, not just here, but in other places too.
Okay.
Kendall County is not the only place in the world that feels they need to be very strict on things. Everybody would agree there's a big difference in selling drugs versus using drugs. We'd also agree that there's a big difference between using methamphetamine or fentanyl and smoking a joint. So priorities sometimes, in my opinion, everywhere, not just here, sometimes I think the priorities get a little messed up and they spend too much time and resources on dealing with things that, like Steve said, knock on the door and say, hey, Junior's over here smoking pot with his friends, handle this. Instead, they got to pay me thousands of dollars or another defense lawyer thousands of dollars. And 18 months later, they're still dealing with it. When a knock on the door
Could have corrected the
could
behavior.
have. Now, in all fairness, like the chief said, parents are not like my dad.
Mhm.
If I, back in 1984,
He was the
believed-
best prosecutor.
prosecutor
Judge,
and
jury,
executioner,
executioner.
Yes.
So when it comes down to, 1984, Dave's brought home, he's in trouble. The belt came out and everybody in the world knew it. Nowadays, a lot of parents are more of, what did you do to my kid? So I see both sides.
Right.
Yeah.
But from a strict economic standpoint, I think that if resources were focused on certain areas, it would be a little bit more efficient for the counties.
Sure. And along those lines, Chief, I know we had a show recently on mental health and a psychiatrist here, and we talked about juveniles. And tell us, what is the Boerne Police Department doing with respect to training or addressing mental health incidents or cases?
Yeah, so mental health, like I said, over the last couple of years is becoming more widely known. And so there's a lot more incidents going across the country, not just in Boerne, Kendall County, where you're hearing everything from, the mass shootings to just, self-infliction and suicide and everything. So it's definitely, Boerne, Kendall County is not, it's part of it too as well. So Older Caps, I guess is our second year going on third year. Just like everywhere else across the country, we got a mental health officer. Officer Rebecca Foley, she's our first mental health officer. And so she's working with the mental health officers from the sheriff's office and also family services, which I think that team is great because obviously we focus on Boerne, because she's Boerne PD, but she's also helping with the other group. And I say they're kind of a teamwork, right? Because one person can't just do it alone. It requires sometimes, the attorneys to get involved, the families to get involved, family services, sometimes, the church, depending on the situation and what that person is going through or suffering from or whatever that current crisis is, it takes a bunch of resources. We deal with veterans, so we'll look out to the veterans for resources. And so these people that are dealing with it, like Officer Foley, their job is to not only find out what's going on, but also where can we delegate and move those resources to get those people the help they need. And it's not just the person itself, right? The person, again, we all just talked about family and everything. So if your kid is in crisis, and again, I say kid, it could be a juvenile, it could be a young adult, it could be a middle-aged adult. Some of them are still at home being taken care of by their parents because of mental health issues. And so not only are we trying to help those people that are in crisis, we're also trying to help the family that are having to deal with them because, like Dave said, back in the day, if you're an old school parent, hey, deal with it, get over it, right? Well, you can't really, that's not the way to go about it these days. And again, it just depends on how severe their issues are. And so that's what we're doing overall.
Do you think that has, or do you think the socioeconomic groups within the county have anything to do with the different types of scenarios that your officers run into? For example, let's say that there's maybe one particular neighborhood within the area that you may experience more of those types of situations with than you would say in a subdivision or a neighborhood in maybe a less privileged area.
I don't think you put really the money part to it, right? Because you got to look at what the crisis is. We talked about drugs addiction. It doesn't matter how much you make or what your family's from, what your upbringing is. It don't matter, right? All it takes is that one person to find whatever that poison is, and they get hooked on it, and it affects everything. They start stealing from their loved ones. They start doing stuff. That's usually what happens a lot of times. They're out there committing thefts and breaking into cars and doing that because they're trying to supplement
Right.
their addiction. Alcohol is the same way, right? So mental health.
There we go. That's what I was
there's-
kind of leading up
As
to.
far as the mental health, there's different areas of mental health, right? There's some people that we've seen out here, like veterans. They got what we call TBI, traumatic brain injury, something that happened overseas while they were fighting in a war. They got blown up, or something happened to where now they suffer this traumatic brain injury, TBI. So they're acting differently, right? So I don't think the money part comes into it. And again, we don't go through insurance. We're not dealing with that side. Our job is how can we help them, whether it's through therapy, whether it's through counseling services, or taking them to the VA, that kind of stuff. So we don't get involved in as far as the money part of it.
So I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
It's interesting that now that we've had just recently with Veterans Day, and that
Correct.
the three of us are veterans, and I even like to say that Robert's a veteran with his service in the Border Patrol, because there's
Yeah.
really not a whole lot of difference in what we did on a day-to-day basis. It was the uniform that we wore.
Yeah.
But I know in counties such as Bexar County and in the San Antonio area, we have Veterans Court. And we don't have any type of a system like that, I believe, here in Kendall County. Is that something you think that would be beneficial to our veterans here in the county?
Absolutely.
Now, what is a veterans court?
Okay, Veterans Court it's a treatment track,
Mhm.
and it's generally used for substance abuse. Some family violence is brought into that as well. But what the court tries to do is they try to ascertain whether or not the behavior or the crime is somehow linked to their military service. So I have a couple of examples. The first example is I had a client who was charged with assaulting their spouse. Thank God it wasn't a serious assault. It was more of a push-shove kind of match.
Right.
But this person had spent almost 2 years overseas, had been blown up twice. And this was a Bexar County case. We submitted the application. They said, yeah, we think that this person's behavior is directly related to their military service. So in that case, it was given to what they call a pretrial diversion track, which is the I hate to say it, most forgiving track. It's for people who have never been in trouble before. It's for people who don't commit anything really serious.
Mm-hmm.
They don't stab somebody or shoot somebody. But it's a rehabilitative track. And basically, for lack of a better term, they're on probation.
Right.
At the end of the probation, if they do everything they're supposed to do, they go to all of their treatment, all of their counseling, their case is dismissed. And at the end of it, their case is eligible for expunction, to where we can go in later and erase it like it never happened.
Mm-hmm.
So for the people that have served our country and have suffered because of that, I think it's a really good tool for us and law enforcement, the court system, to allow these guys to not have to answer for this one little incident.
Give them a second chance.
Yeah, 30 years later.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's a second chance, but I think it's deeper than that. I think it's really, first of all, acknowledging that what these people went through overseas is far worse than what Steve or I have ever seen on the streets as police officers. And we've seen our share of dead bodies. We've gone out to accidents and seen horrific things. But what these guys overseas see and what they go through, 1,000 times worse than that. And to allow them the opportunity to try to get over that over time without having to feel the hammer of justice on their head every time they mess up, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. So is that similar to pretrial diversion, like when a juvenile is picked up for a joint, for example, and you can go to the prosecutor and say, look, this is his first offense, and we don't want to ruin this kid's life because of a mistake he made. Is that similar, but just for veterans?
It's exactly the same thing, with the difference in how the probation is administered.
Okay.
Usually normal probation or normal pretrial diversion, you go once a month, you take a drug test, pay your fee, take your classes, your community service, and you're done. With the Veterans Court, and like with mental health court as well, they'll have extra meetings. And in San Antonio, with the Veterans Court, once a month, all of the veterans who are in the court will show up to the Veterans Courtroom, and they have a meeting. And it's almost like an AA meeting where they stand up and go, hey, here's this month, here's what I've accomplished, here's how I failed. And the group tries to support the group. That's in addition to all the VA treatment, the psychological treatment that goes along with it. But I think when you put people in a room who all have similar experiences and they can support each other, there's a much higher percentage of success.
Right.
And they have a very good success rate over there.
Is that a resource issue, though, Dave? Does Kendall County have the resources to create another program like this Veterans Court, or is that what's limiting us from not having it here? I'm assuming we don't have one, correct?
We don't have one.
Okay.
I'm going to answer this like a politician would answer this.
No, we have another show for politicians. This is a show for men that tell the truth.
I truly believe that our community has the financial resources to do this.
Okay.
Okay. They haven't done it for whatever reason, and I really haven't pressed that issue. The cases that I have had in Kendall County, we referred them out to the Boerne County Veterans Court for administration because we don't have that here. I think we should have one. For whatever reason, we don't. I'd like to see it happen, though.
Okay. Well, that's good. Thank you for being honest about it. I don't think that was a politician.
No, I think that was awesome.
That's good, Dave. Yes. So, Chief, you've been the chief of police now here for how long?
Just over a year and a half.
A year and a half. Okay. But you've been with the Boerne Police Department for a long time.
Yeah.
So, some of the programs that you have experienced as an officer that you are proud of that you're going to continue. What is like one program that you wouldn't change?
So, I mean, there's a couple different programs. One of the ones that is going extremely well is the school resource officer program.
Mm-hmm.
We got a great relationship with the school district. Of course, after Uvalde, our goal had been to always slowly put an officer at every campus. And so I think we were around 5 officers there's 9 schools within the city limits of Boerne, out of the 14 throughout the county. And so our goal was to slowly start, every year adding an SRO. Uvalde tragedy happened, and so after that, we basically got together and said, let's just go ahead and do it now.
You expanded it.
So we went ahead and put an officer in every school, and so now we're at. We started out with 1 officer back when I first started. Officer Hector Hernandez was the lone SRO for the school district, and now we're at 9 total.
That's fantastic.
And so we've added a sergeant, a corporal, and the SROs. And then the county and Fair Oaks, we all have mutual contracts with the school district, but that way every school in Kendall County or Boerne ISD, because there's the schools in Fair Oaks are technically Boerne County, but all.
So that's a program you'd like to keep? Or
yeah,
continue?
definitely moving forward with that.
And now that you're the king, you're the chief, you can make all decisions. Any program that you'd like to implement or you have in your sights for the future?
Yeah, so definitely the mental health. Like to continue to add another officer to that because, like we mentioned, it's growing. It's a growing need, and so we're seeing the numbers since we've kind of started keeping track increasing as far as the number, like just even the emergency detentions, those are increasing, and so we'd like to. I would see add another officer. So that way we have 2 and then continue working with all the other groups that we're working with, the nonprofits and stuff like that to battle those issues.
And I kid about you being the king. Yes, you're the chief and you've got some control of the budget, but you still have to go to someone, right? Is that
all got bosses?
Yeah. who is the person you'd have to go to for more resources and who do we as taxpayers can go to help bend their ear to?
Yeah. So obviously with the city, just like with county government, everybody has budget.
Yes.
When we start our budget talks, it's usually around springtime.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of, everyone gets together and just like any other plan, right? You kind of have your wish list and there's some stuff that you have to need. Those are those legal requirements. Mm-hmm. Okay. We got to have XYZ. We got to have certain training has to be met each year. So those are the things that we plan for. And then of course there's the wish list of, okay, we want to add another SRO. What's that going to cost? If we just want to add another officer, what's that going to cost? And we're not talking just an officer, right? A lot of people just think it's just a body, but, and Dave knows this, right? I mean, you're talking about all the uniform and equipment that they got to be outfitted with.
Radios.
The training, right? So we got to take all the training. They need something to drive. Mm-hmm. So that's a vehicle. And then everything that goes in a vehicle to include the markings and everything. So all that adds up. So when we say we need an officer, we try to put all that in there because if you get an officer, And that's
equip
what,
'em.
and that's, you see that across the country. That's what they do. When you add an officer, you're adding a vehicle, you're adding, they need not only pistol, they need rifles now, because that's the
Right.
thing now, right? Shields, we're adding shields to our arsenal. there.
Cameras, radios.
Cameras,
Yeah.
For the cars, all that stuff adds up very quick.
So, Chief Perez, you've been here in Boerne for your whole career, pretty much. What do you see as increasing in crime? And could you kind of give us a list from top to bottom as to what crimes are increasing in our area?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that we've seen, and that's been as long as I've been here, is property crime. That's still going to be our largest one.
Number one.
What we've seen kind of slowly growing over the last couple of years is, we used to have the car burglaries. We're right off I-10. So usually the criminals start in San Antonio and they work their way up, sometimes all the way to Kerrville and back. And so as they're going along I-10, they're hitting these neighborhoods kind of right off I-10. Sometimes they come a little bit further into town. But what we've seen increase now is the amount of vehicles being stolen. Before, they were just breaking into cars, opening doors, taking stuff. Now we're actually seeing them opening doors, taking stuff, and taking cars. The biggest part we have with that is just the unlocked doors. A lot of people still,
The fundamentals.
small town, nothing happens in Boerne. And so a lot of the crooks know that, because all it takes is one crew. Dave knows this. One crew will go hit this area and they'll brag to all their buddies to say, man, we hit, 10, 15, 20 cars that were all unlocked. Key fobs were in the car. And so guess what? That crew's going to come back with more people.
Right.
Or they're going to go tell another crew. And so that's kind of what we're experiencing that. So my message is lock your doors, lock your cars, take your fobs inside the house with you. Set the alarms. They all got alarms pretty much, or at least remote lock doors.
Okay.
Lock those doors, because we're not seeing the forced entry where they're breaking the windows and, jimmying steering columns or doing any of that kind of stuff. It's really, they're just opening the door, hitting push to start, and car starts, and we're driving off.
Well, I got a question for you. Are you seeing where people are breaking into cars and they're using the garage door openers to get in? Because I know when I was an officer, we had a rash of that, where it was about a 6-month period where it was, of course, auto burglaries, where they were going in the car and stealing things.
Yeah.
But they were hitting the garage door opener, going into houses and
Gotcha.
burglarizing the houses. I haven't seen a case like that to defend, but I mean, have you seen that at the police department?
We have not really seen that. Most of the time, they're just hitting the cars, getting the cars, and going. They're not really making entry into the houses.
Good.
So don't say that out too loud.
But
But some of the stuff that we're, again, right, being with property crime, some of the stuff that we just implemented this year, and we work well with our IT department. We're starting to work with TxDOT and all that, but we implemented license plate readers coming into the city. And so that's kind of, again, nothing's a 100% deterrent. But that's, again, going back to technology. You're starting to see that across the country. And the license plate reader, what we're finding out is they're stealing the cars in San Antonio, right? And then they're taking those stolen cars, driving to Boerne. Well, then what they're doing is then taking a car from Boerne and then going back to San Antonio. So if we can catch that stolen car coming into town ahead of time, and that sends out a signal to our guys to be on the alert, here comes a white Kia, whatever, then our guys can try to knock it down. And if they see it, they can stop it. Whatever, anything helps, right?
got to ask you another question, Chief. I know drugs, of course, is an issue, but immigration is a hot issue now. With the masses of people coming across the border, and I, being an old Border Patrol agent, I wasn't used to police departments or county sheriffs helping us out. We were on our own, but I'm seeing a shift there. Do you have pressure for your department to get involved in we see illegal aliens coming through the community or through interstate, and I hear about these loads there. Are you guys having any problems with that? Are you focusing on that at all?
We're not focusing on it. We're not feeling any pressure for people to say go out there and do border patrol type.
Cars,
we work I-10, we work the city. We go to the calls. Our guys are obviously allowed to do traffic stops and things like that. And we've come across it. It's just one of those things. You see a car's suspicious activity, whatever the case is. Sometimes it's called in by people. If we catch it, we'll deal with it. But it's not something that we're focused on, and we're putting guys out there on the street just to say, go look for, these trafficking and stuff like that. We don't get a lot of calls about our hotels having people come in and trafficking like you do in the bigger cities.
Right.
But again, right, if somebody calls in and says something, we're not going to shy away from it. We'll go investigate it. We have had a few over the last year where we've stopped those cars and had 7 or 8 people. And generally what we do is we take the driver or the people responsible for the actual trafficking. Once we can determine that that's what's happening, we usually do contact ICE.
Yes.
And we say, hey, here's what we got. A lot of it is now, I guess because of COVID, everything can be online through TV and Zoom. And so we'll usually have that, but very rarely does somebody actually come out.
Yes, just put a detainer.
And 9 times out of 10, there's no room for them.
Right.
So generally, once we allow ICE to come in and interview them, and we get all the information, document them, that kind of stuff, take pictures.
They're released.
They're released
Right.
outside our doors.
Which kind of, that I'm glad you said that, because I know I experienced that. It was so frustrating for the police department and border patrol. And John, you also, fortunately, we don't have that here too much, I don't think, but there's been a lot of car chases, in some of these border towns or in the interior from these, and it's just something that I know police are having to deal with more and more these days.
Well, I would expect us to have, something going on within Kendall County. We've got such a large section of I-10 coming through it. And not only from the illegal immigration trafficking aspect, but what about the child trafficking? And I think a lot of our viewers and listeners have been paying attention to social media and hearing things that are going on in other parts of the country. And as a private investigator, I've worked on several multiple actually missing person cases that turned into to child trafficking cases. Are we seeing anything like that happening here in Boerne?
No, we're not. Nothing that's being reported. And so I'll just say that,
awesome.
right? Again, it's not something we just hop up on, but nothing's being reported. And again, going back to the hotels, we've had a few calls where the hotel people here are pretty good about calling and saying
Something suspicious.
something's not right, and can y'all come check it out? And we've done that before. But again, as far as doing things like that, we haven't had those. But we stay pretty active.
Sure.
We work with both DPS and Attorney General's office. We've done some stings, where we try to be the person on the other side of the line, because everything's online now.
Yes.
Everything's through all these chat groups and different. I mean, there's different groups out there I don't even know the names of, right? We find out, but it's just all communication chat groups, and and that's how they go to solicit these minors and kids and stuff like that. And so again, those are the things that we, being a small department, we don't have the resources to have a dedicated team to just purely focus on that. But we reach out to again, Attorney General's office, the DPS that have those groups, and we bring them in. We'll let them set up at the PD and do stings and stuff like that. So we do that from time to time. And that just keeps everybody on their toes because they don't know.
Right.
If we can get the reputation for don't come to Boerne because you may get arrested, then that's the reputation we want to keep it. That way people will, think twice before they try to do something.
Yes, I don't speed along Fair Oaks. Fair Oaks Ranch. So Dave, what about you as a defense attorney? What cases are you seeing an increase in high profile cases? Or is it mostly drugs?
Before I go there, let me tell John something. You hit something on the head that needs to be talked about, where you talked about trafficking of children versus trafficking of, say, illegals.
Right.
What people don't understand is the same statute covers both. The part of the problem, and it's really outside of the police purview, it's more of inside the court system, is that whenever a couple of years ago they changed the law to where any trafficking was a felony, there were a couple of prosecution district attorneys' offices that said, our policy now is if you get caught human trafficking, you will go to prison. There'll be no plea bargain. There'll be no probation, nothing. Well, they found out real fast
That's
that
Pandora's box.
Well, and let's try to focus specifically on the illegals versus the children, because the children, I mean, I've got no issue with that at all.
Sure.
You traffic children, as far as I'm concerned,
You're going to prison.
well, go to hell. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. But there's different kinds of people that are violating this statute. Of course, there are the cartel people. These are the business people who are moving truckloads of people, and they're making money doing this.
Right.
What I've seen in my personal cases is there'll be a 19-year-old girl who gets convinced to go pick up two people in Del Rio, and drive them to Dallas.
Right.
Okay. Not a cartel member.
$100 a head, maybe 200 bucks.
Maybe something like
Right.
that. And this is not Al Capone. This is not your drug trafficker. They don't care about fentanyl. They're doing what their boyfriend told them to do.
Right.
Okay. The first one of those cases I had was in a jurisdiction where their policy was no, nothing. You're going to prison. That was the policy. And it took me 7 or 8 months of meeting to finally get this person into a deferred probation, which is what she needed. She didn't need to go to prison. She didn't need to have a felony conviction.
Right.
So the light shined on this prosecutor that, yes, there are different kinds of people violating this law for different reasons. And those differences are important as to how you enforce that ultimately in the end.
Yes.
So I was just trying to make a point that what you brought up was very important. Children, if you're trafficking children for sex purposes or anything else, you're out.
Right.
So,
Well, and then I just the follow up. Oh, it's sorry, folks. Our light just went out. We'll figure out what that is in a minute, but it looks like we're fine on the screen. So, inefficiencies, David, and I don't want to. I think we can all agree that if we didn't have any crime, neither one of you would have a job.
absolutely.
Right. And in a perfect world, in a utopian world, that's where we would be. Unfortunately, that we're not. But we are also human beings. We're also administrators. We're in leadership positions, and we have people with personalities and challenges that all work for us.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, there are inefficiencies. As a defense attorney or defense attorney, are there some perceptible inefficiencies within the legal or criminal justice system that you are seeing that we or our listeners can help alleviate? Or are there some improvements that can be made that make more common sense? Does that make sense to you?
It does. It goes back to what we talked to at the very beginning, as to letting other parts of the community handle certain problems. And I know that my viewpoint is a little skewed. I didn't work in a police department in a place like Boerne or Fair Oaks or Kerrville. The department I worked in, we had 430 officers.
Mhm.
A typical 10-hour shift for us was 25 to 35 calls for service in a day.
Mhm.
We had no choice but to prioritize what we did.
Right. So,
as an example, minor in possession of alcohol. We didn't waste our time. I hate to use the word waste of time because it's not really like that. It's we were
Too busy.
We were too busy.
Yeah.
We had 10 other calls that were pending, and instead of writing an MIP ticket and driving them down, it was call your parents, come get you right now. Mom and dad showed up. They got a little butt chewing. Kid got a butt chewing, went on his way because we were en route to a burglary call. It's a little different in a smaller town or on an area where you're not working as hard. And I hate to use the word hard. You're not as busy. You can take your priorities a little bit easier. And sometimes those priorities get a little mixed up. Just because it's a small town doesn't mean that we don't have the burglaries or the sexual assaults or the murders or the shootings or the auto burglaries where they're stealing your car. Here's one of the examples that I like to use of complete, what I call misuse of resources. And it was not your department, which is a good thing.
Good to know.
but you would have said if it was. Right?
If it was, absolutely.
Yeah.
But, okay. Officers respond to a party, and there's 35, 40 high school kids there, a couple of kegs of beer. I end up with 5 or 6 MIP clients where they wrote 32 or 34, I don't remember the number, of MIPs at this party. So I started asking my clients, well, how many parents showed up to pick up their kids? None of them. Where'd y'all all go? Oh, we went home. Well, so you drove home? That's one part of the problem. The second part of the problem is sometimes you have a better impact by having the parents come and pick the kids up.
Right.
For a couple of reasons. First of all, you're notifying directly the parents, here's what your kid was doing. Look at the CAG right over here. They can't question whether or not their kid was there or wasn't doing it because they get to see it. And the second thing is the kid, and I use the word kid, it could be 17 or 18-year-old, I don't know. They're going to remember that the officer exercised his discretion and didn't hammer them. And these kids, 10, 15 years from now, might be applying for your department or the sheriff's department or DPS because they had a positive experience with law enforcement that could have been negative.
Love that.
So on multiple levels, it's more efficient sometimes to take the lowest level of enforcement possible.
Right.
Versus stroking out 32 tickets and then for statistics purposes, hey, look at everything I wrote. It's not all about stats. It's about how are you impacting people.
Right.
Another example would be when you pick somebody up and they have multiple charges. And I see this all the time where a person will have possession of marijuana. They'll have a gun in the car, so they get an unlawful carrying of a weapon. And then they have a pipe they were smoking the marijuana with.
Paraphernalia.
Right. So they get arrested for both of the misdemeanors, and they write them a ticket in municipal court for the paraphernalia, which puts me in a unique situation because we go to municipal court with these, and the municipal court prosecutor and judge are like, well, you have other cases in county court. We're going to wait until those are resolved. But they don't normally understand that it takes 9 months to a year to resolve the cases over in district court. So for efficiency purposes, and again, that's not always what we do, what I did on the street was if I had you on a possession of marijuana case and a paraphernalia, you're under arrest for this, you go to jail, I tag the paraphernalia. I don't tie up two different courts basically occupying the same thing, which happens a lot. I get that in Boerne County, I get it in Kendall County, I get it in Kerr County. Everywhere does this.
Is that an officer training issue? Do the officers know your job and outside of arresting people? Is that something we can do better to train them on these issues?
I think the officers don't understand what I do.
Right.
I mean, most of them don't. I didn't when I was an officer.
Right.
I thought defense lawyers were the enemy. I mean, my attitude was, screw those defense lawyers.
Right.
And again, my perception of this is skewed by my experience. We had a district attorney that came to all of our briefings, came to our in-service training,
Provided you some training.
and said, hey guys, look, we know that you may have 5 charges on this one person. Save us the work of having to file 5 cases when we're doing 10,000 a year. Just give me the top 1 or 2, let the other ones go. Let us focus on those.
Right.
And frankly, I don't know what is going on in the Hill Country. I don't know what the prosecutors are telling the officers, but I see this a lot where a client comes in and they'll have 5 or 6 cases out of 1 arrest. And it's like, you have to answer 3 indictments and 2 or 3 misdemeanors. And it's, first of all, it becomes prohibitively expensive for these folks to hire a lawyer to do that. So a lot of these guys are getting court-appointed lawyers on the county dime. So there's multiple levels of economic inefficiency in that. Having said that, there's times when you just can't. You have one of those deals where it's multiple auto burglaries and you have multiple victims or burglaries or sexual assault. Of course, you can't cut those corners. But what I'm seeing is there's a lot of stacking going on. And we can have a philosophical discussion about what laws I think are correct and are applied correctly and not. That's another 2.5 hour conversation.
We'll have to have you back here with the district attorney, maybe.
Well, but I think overall in Kendall County, law enforcement does a pretty good job with that. I do think some of the officers are a little more zealous than the other ones.
Always.
And there's some cases I get where, like I said, these guys just hook them up for everything they can think of. And it's just, I don't think that's real justice when you do that.
I think you mentioned something earlier, and just real quick, because we are getting short on time. We were talking before the show about things that you think that could be done or implemented to help both you as a defense attorney and then also the officers. And I think you mentioned something about report writing.
Absolutely. There's a huge variation in the quality of reports written by officers and all in departments as well. One of the funniest things is when you go to Boerne County and you read an SAPD report, they give a little like V1 for victim number one.
I want to say they're horrible. I've read many of them.
Well, the little, I don't want to call it a pronoun because it's not a pronoun, but they'll give a designation to each person.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they write their report, they refer to them in what they write by the designation, not by their name.
Right.
So when you have 15 people involved in a report, you don't know who did what. I always train my officers.
Can we do that at Boerne?
No. Thank God they don't.
Good. I just wanted to give the chief a chance.
B12.
Chief doesn't do that.
Exactly.
Mm.
So, but in the police reports, I always train my recruits, write your report like you're telling me a story.
Right.
And I hear things like, when I approached, I exited my vehicle.
I ascertained.
Yeah, I got out. I ascertained. It's police jargon.
Yes,
okay?
I understand it.
And it works. Don't get me wrong. But I like reading reports.
But that's y'all's fault. The attorneys have taught the officers to use those words.
No. Clarity, okay? And you don't have to have 15 paragraphs to be clear, okay? If you pull somebody over on a traffic stop and I get these 3 paragraphs of how they followed him and followed him and followed him, I'm like, okay, I was on patrol Monday, July 12th, and I saw a white Mazda run the stop sign at blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Okay. It's just like you're telling me a story. Okay. I can understand that. I could give a copy to my daughter. She could understand that. The prosecutor's going to understand that. Be very clear. The other part is understanding, and then I was trained on this as an officer, got a lot of training as an attorney on this, is developing probable cause to make an arrest.
Articulable suspicion leads to probable cause.
Articulate why you did things.
Mm-hmm.
I get a lot of reports where I have to sit and wonder why you did that.
Right.
I just handled a case it's pretty close to the valley, and it was a DPS trooper pulled over a pickup truck and asked the guy, "Do you have a gun in the truck?" Client said, "Yeah, I got a gun in the truck." "Well, where is it?" Well, he points to where it's at. The trooper walks around, sticks his head inside the truck, looks down and goes, "Oh, you can't have that gun because it's not in a holster. It's in plain view." I contacted the prosecutor down there and said, "Hey, take a look at this video, because your officer who wrote that this is in plain view has to stick his head into a car where he's not allowed to do it in order to see this." Okay. Well, that brings on another thing. Be honest in your reports as to exactly what you did and why you did it, and recognize that if you did something that is incorrect, don't make the arrest. What year did you become an officer?
98.
98. Okay. I was in 91. Back then, the attitude in police was, you know what? They can beat the rat, but they can't beat the ride. What that meant was, arrest them. It don't matter if you do it right or not. Right. They may beat it in court, arrest them anyway.
Right.
The problem is nowadays with body cams, dash cams, my client was arrested wrong.
Right.
Okay. I say luckily, he's just one of those people that's like, I don't want to do anything about it. But could that trooper be in trouble? Absolutely. Because in his report, he wrote something that was not reflected in his video.
Interesting.
Okay. I don't see that here in Boerne. Very, very few. Most of the officers are really good. What I do see in Boerne and Kendall County is officers that don't write details. And then we have to flush the details out in front of a judge. That is very inefficient to do that. If the details were in the report, we might not have to have that hearing. The client might not have to pay me the extra $1,000 for the hearing. And I mean, when you add in manpower for the district attorney, man hours for the judge, for the prosecutor, but
The jail.
the jail. When you add all that in, prosecuting a case is very expensive.
Yes, yes.
You know, I think I figured out one day that a misdemeanor case, when you factor in officer time, jailer time, food, medical, prosecutor, county clerk, district clerk, everybody, bailiffs who are involved,
Big business.
everything else, you're pushing $5,500, $6,000 just to get one case through. And I think if the government really put that in perspective, and I've asked this question on my social media before, what's it worth? Is now an assault case absolutely is worth it. Sexual assault case absolutely is worth it. There are certain things that are worth everything. A murder case is worth everything. You catch a kid with a joint. You catch somebody driving down the road and their gun's not in a holster. When otherwise they would be okay to carry it.
Right.
Is the economic cost of the prosecution and ultimate dismissal of that, is it worth doing, or is it better to put, and I hate to use the word policy because you know I hate policy,
Right.
a guideline in place that says, hey, if that's all you got, write the report and let them go.
Sure.
So
we've got a few seconds left. I'm sure you probably, do you have anything else you want to?
No. I just want to. I really want to thank the chief of police for coming out here.
Absolutely.
And putting himself on the firing line. And
There's no firing line.
thank you so much, Chief. Thank you for what you and your troops do, and we appreciate you keeping Boerne safe.
Yeah.
And thank you, Dave, for balancing the scales of justice. You know, by helping people that need the help, and seeing it from your perspective as well helps being a former police officer.
well, thanks for not inviting me to a debate.
When we invite you for the debate, you're going to have to show up in your flamingo shirts.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Serious.
Yes,
So.
sir.
Well, folks, if you have nothing else, again, Chief, thank you so much, because I know you've got
Thank you.
so much more on your plate. But our viewers and our listeners are going to be very appreciative of you sharing your time with us, because we know how valuable that is. Dave, your time is just as valuable on the other side of the coin, where you're, like Robert said, assisting and there are folks out there that definitely need your help and your assistance, and so appreciative of your time. Definitely want to hear more about your music. I think there's some possibility that Dave may hit the street for us at some point in the future, and
Singing
and
Hopefully
start
not
singing.
singing.
Exactly.
You never know, man. It could happen.
So, folks, once again, thank you for joining us. If you haven't already, please reach down, click the bell for notifications, click the like and subscribe. Leave a comment on the social media, Facebook. What else are we on? We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok.
Used to be Twitter.
It used to
On
be
X.
Twitter. So everything that you can do, please, folks, and you want to see more of what we're doing, send us a note to the Texas Examiner at gmail.com.
Right. And if you've got guests that you'd like for us to interview here on the show, please send us your suggestions. We'd love to
Absolutely.
have guests. And again, here at the Texas Examiner, we like to have guests that talk about the same issue with different perspectives, like we did today with our police chief and a defense attorney. That doesn't always happen at a coffee table where you have these two sitting down and talking about issues that they're both trying to accomplish the same thing, keep us safe, and balance the scales of justice. So if you have other people you'd like to invite, let us know.